The trading station at the edge of the galaxy was not a place for heroes. It was a place for desperate merchants, smugglers, and people who wanted to disappear. Mark had come here for something simple: spare parts for his old ship. He didn't want trouble, and he didn't want attention, but trouble had a way of finding him. The air was thick with the smell of oil, metal dust, and strange spices from alien markets. Vendors shouted in different languages, some of them selling food, others selling things that should never be sold. Mark walked through the narrow alleys, his boots clanging on rusted metal plates. His mind focused on the list of parts he needed. He just wanted to get in and get out, but then he heard it, a small, trembling voice calling for help. At first, he thought it was his imagination. The station was noisy, and people cried out all the time. But then he heard it again, faint but desperate. It was coming from a dark corner at the far end of the alley. Behind a stack of broken cargo crates, Mark hesitated. He knew that following strange voices on a station like this was a good way to get robbed or worse. Still, something about the voice. It was not just fear, it was pain, and against his better judgment, he moved closer. The shadows swallowed him as he stepped behind the crates. There, crouched beside a rusted storage container, were two tiny alien girls. Both had fur covered, ears on the tops of their heads twitching nervously. Their tails were long and thin, wrapped tightly around their legs. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark. One pair gold, the other green. They looked no older than children. Yet their sharp fangs and claws told him they could be dangerous if cornered. Each girl had a metal collar on her neck, chains bolted to the wall behind them. Their fur was matted with dirt, their clothes torn. One of them, the girl with golden eyes, immediately grabbed his arm, her voice urgent. "Take me away, human, please," she whispered. But before he could answer, the green-eyed one hissed, pulling his other arm toward her. "No, take me, not her." They glared at each other, ears flat against their heads. Mark looked from one to the other, confused. "What's going on here?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Neither answered, but they both pulled at his arms, each trying to keep him away from the other. The chains were heavy, made of alien alloy he didn't recognize. Mark knelt down, trying to inspect the locks. "Who did this to you?" he asked. "Her people," the golden-eyed one snapped. "My people?" The green-eyed one hissed back. "You liar. It was you who betrayed." Before they could continue, Mark heard a faint humming sound. It was coming from the main alley. Growing louder, his stomach tightened. Patrol drones. If they found him here with two chained slaves, he'd be the one in chains next. He looked at the girls. "You want to get out of here?" he whispered. They both nodded instantly, though they still shot each other hateful glances. "Then you're going to have to trust me," he said, pulling a small cutting tool from his belt. The tool sparked as it touched the alien metal. It was slow work, far slower than he liked. The sound of the patrol drones was getting closer. The girls shifted nervously, their tails twitching. "Hurry," the green-eyed one whispered. "Work faster," the golden-eyed one urged. The first chain snapped free with a sharp ping. The green-eyed girl leapt forward, rubbing her sore wrists. But instead of helping the other girl, she stood back, still glaring at her. Mark shot her a look. "We're not leaving anyone behind," he said firmly. The second chain broke just as a beam of white light swept into the alley. Mark grabbed both girls by the wrists and pulled them into the shadows. They stumbled after him, their light steps barely making a sound. He led them through a narrow service tunnel, the air stale and cold. The hum of the patrol drones faded. Behind them, replaced by the low thrum of the station's old engines. When they finally reached a quiet corner, Mark let them catch their breath. The girls kept their distance from each other. He could feel the tension between them like static in the air. They both wanted freedom, but neither wanted to share it. Mark didn't understand why, but he knew one thing. He had just stepped into something far bigger than a simple rescue, and whatever it was, it had just made him the enemy of someone dangerous. Mark knew he couldn't stay in the quiet corner. For long, the station was crawling with eyes. And someone would notice 2 missing slaves sooner or later. He looked at the 2 small alien girls, both trembling, but still glaring at each other like enemies. He didn't even know why they hated each other, but it didn't matter, right? Now if they didn't move, they were all going to get caught. "Come on," Mark said, motioning for them to follow. The golden-eyed girl stepped forward instantly, sticking close to his left side. The green-eyed girl hesitated, then grabbed his right arm like she didn't want to be left behind. They walked fast through the maze of service corridors, the hum of the station's life support systems echoing around them. Every time Mark slowed, the girls pulled at him, each trying to make him take a different route. It was like they didn't just want to escape, they wanted to make sure the other didn't. Finally, Mark stopped, turning to face them. "If you two keep pulling me in different directions, we're all going to end up dead," he said, his voice low but firm. The golden-eyed girl crossed her arms. "She betray you, human," she muttered. The green-eyed girl hissed, "Better me than her. She lies about everything." Mark rubbed his forehead, wondering how he had ended up in this mess. Before he could argue more, a metallic clicking sound echoed down the corridor. It was the sound of security drone legs tapping against the floor. Mark swore under his breath, grabbing both girls by the arms. "This way," he whispered, pulling them into an old maintenance shaft. The shaft was narrow, the air stale, and cold. They crawled on hands and knees, their movements slow and awkward. The girls' tails flicked behind them nervously. At one point, the golden-eyed girl almost hissed when the green-eyed one brushed against her. Mark shot them both a warning. "Look, save the fighting for later," he muttered. They emerged into a storage room filled with dusty crates and broken machinery. Mark quickly found a control panel and tried to override the door locks. While he worked, he could hear the girls whispering behind him. They weren't exactly talking, more like exchanging sharp, quiet insults in a language he didn't understand. But every now and then, he caught one word in galactic common: betrayal, liar, thief. Finally, the door hissed open. Mark led them into another corridor, this one quieter and less patrolled. They moved quickly, heading toward docking bay 6 where his old freighter, the Sparrow's Wing, was waiting. But halfway there, the station's alarm system began to blare. A cold voice echoed through the speakers. "Alert! 2 escaped property units detected. Reward for capture." The girls froze, their ears flattening. Mark didn't waste time. He grabbed their hands and ran. He could hear heavy boots pounding somewhere above them, the sound of station guards being deployed. They burst into the docking bay just as 2 patrol drones rounded the corner. Girls yelped as Mark shoved them into his ship's cargo hold, slamming the hatch shut. The hum of the engines roared to life, and the Sparrow's Wing lifted off the dock. Blaster fire streaked past the viewports, but Mark's hands were steady on the controls. Once they were in open space, the tension in the cockpit was thick. The golden-eyed girl sat in the co-pilot seat, arms crossed. The green-eyed one stayed in the back, staring out at the stars. Mark glanced between them. "Names," he said. The golden-eyed girl looked at him first. "Lyra," she said simply. The green-eyed one spoke without turning. "Sorry," Mark nodded slowly. "Well, Lyra, sorry. Whatever your problem with each other is, you're stuck on my ship now." Lyra's tail flicked. "Not for long," she muttered. Sari's voice was sharp. "Good. I don't want to be here with her anyway." Mark sighed. He had rescued people before, but never 2 who seemed more eager to fight each other than escape danger. He didn't know their full story yet, but he could see something in their eyes, a mixture of fear, anger, and deep, old hurt. Whatever had happened between them, it ran deep, and now, by rescuing them both, he had thrown himself right into the middle of it. For a moment, there was silence, then a faint, rhythmic beeping sounded from the ship's console. Mark leaned forward, checking the sensors. A small vessel was following them, keeping its distance but not losing speed. The transponder code was hidden, but the girl seemed to recognize it instantly. Both stiffened at the same time, their voices dropping to whispers. "They found us," Lyra said, her voice trembling. Sari's claws dug into the armrest. "The slavers," Mark's jaw tightened. He had just escaped one mess, only to land in a bigger one. He glanced at the girls again. Whether they liked it or not, they were going to have to work together now, because if they didn't, none of them would survive what was coming next. The hum of the sparrow's wing filled the silence outside. The stars stretched into long lines as the ship entered hyperspace. Inside, the tension was like a rope pulled too tight. Lyra sat near the front of the cargo hold, her tail wrapped tightly around her legs. Sari stayed on the far side, leaning against a crate, her ears angled away from Lyra. Neither looked at the other, but both kept stealing quick glances when they thought no one was watching. Mark set the ship on autopilot and stepped into the chief. "Hold," he crossed his arms, looking from one girl to the other. "All right, time to talk," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Who's chasing you? And why do they care so much about getting you back?" Lyra's golden eyes narrowed. "They want me because I escaped them once before," she said. "I know things, routes, contacts, secret codes." Her voice carried pride, but also a shadow of fear. Sari let out a sharp laugh. "She knows things, all right, like how to sell people out for her own skin." Lyra's ears flattened. "You're the one who betrayed our colony," she hissed. Mark stepped between them before the argument could turn into claws. "Enough," he said. "If you want me to help you, I need the truth, both of you." For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the engines. Then Sari spoke, her voice quieter now. "We were from the same moon, a small settlement of our kind. The slavers came in the night. They promised freedom to anyone who gave up the location of the others." Her green eyes flashed at Lyra. "She disappeared that night, and when she came back, the slavers knew exactly where everyone was hiding." "That's not what happened," Lyra shot back. Her voice trembled with anger. "I went to find help. I found a group of traders who said they would rescue our people, but they lied. They sold the information to the slavers, and by the time I found out, it was too late." Mark listened, piecing together the story. It was clear that both girls believed what they were saying. Whether one of them was lying or both were telling partial truths, he couldn't be sure. But one thing was clear: whatever had happened had left them with scars deeper than the ones on their skin. Before he could ask more, the ship's console beeped. Mark walked over and checked the readout. A faint energy spike was appearing in their wake. Someone was trying to track them even in hyperspace. That meant only one thing: the slavers had a lock on their trail. Mark turned to the girls. "Whoever these people are, they've got tech good enough to chase us through hyperspace," he said. "I need to know exactly what you two are carrying that's worth that kind of trouble." The two exchanged a tense glance. Lyra looked away first. "They think we have the key," she said softly. "What key?" Mark asked. Sari's voice was flat. "A memory crystal. It has the location of the vault from our colony, a vault full of rare metals, food stores, and something else." Lyra's eyes flicked toward Sari, but she didn't deny it. Mark could feel his stomach tighten. So this wasn't just about escaped slaves. This was about a treasure. And treasure always meant danger, before they could speak. Again, the ship jolted violently. The lights flickered, and a warning flashed across the console: proximity alert. Mark's eyes narrowed. Someone had forced their way into the same hyperspace lane. That wasn't easy to do. Only skilled hunters or very determined enemies could manage it. The girls froze, their fur bristling. "It's them," Lyra whispered. "They'll board us," Sari added, her voice low. Mark moved quickly, locking down the ship's main hatch and sealing the cockpit. He turned back to the girls. "You both say you hate each other," he said. "But right now you're going to have to work together, because if they get on this ship, neither of you will be free again." Lyra's tail twitched. Sari's claws tapped against the crate. They didn't answer, but they nodded. Mark tossed each of them a small stun pistol from his weapons locker. "Stay behind cover, aim for the legs, and don't get separated," he instructed. The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed through the hull. The hunters were trying to latch on. Mark gritted his teeth, his mind racing for a plan. The ship was small, his weapons limited, but he'd survived worse. And if these girls really carried something this valuable, he wasn't about to hand them over without a fight. The lights dimmed again. The engines groaned under the strain. Mark took a deep breath. The next few minutes would decide everything, whether they escaped into the shadows again, or whether the shadows swallowed them for good. The ship shook as something heavy clamped onto the outer hull. A dull thud echoed through the metal walls, followed by the hiss of a docking seal. Mark's hands moved fast over the control panel, trying to break the latch, but the hunter's lock was strong. "Hold on," he muttered, rerouting power from the secondary systems to the thrusters. Lyra and Sari crouched behind a stack of cargo crates, stun pistols in hand, their ears twitching at every sound. They weren't speaking, but their eyes were sharp, watching the narrow corridor that led to the docking hatch. Mark glanced at them. "You see movement. You shoot," he said. Neither argued. A loud metallic snap came from above, followed by the creak of an airlock opening. The hiss of pressurized air filled the corridor. Then came footsteps, heavy, slow, and deliberate. Mark's gut told him these weren't just random slavers. These were hunters who enjoyed the chase. The first shadow appeared at the far end of the corridor. A tall figure in dark armor, helmet, visor glowing red. Behind him, two more moved into view, each carrying a long, curved weapon that looked like a cross between a blade and a shock prod. They advanced with calm confidence, as if certain their prey had nowhere to run. Mark ducked back into the cockpit, his fingers flying over the controls. He triggered the emergency vent system in the docking tunnel. With a sudden roar, air blasted out, slamming the nearest hunter into the wall. But the others had magnetic boots and stayed firmly in place. One of them fired a grapple into the floor, securing the line as they pushed forward. "Go!" Mark shouted to the girls. Lyra popped up from behind the crates, firing her stun pistol. The blue charge hit the second hunter square in the chest, making his armor spark. He staggered but didn't fall. Sari darted from the other side, her shot hitting the third hunter in the leg, slowing him down. The corridor became chaos blaster fire, shouts in alien tongues, the hiss of overheating weapons. Mark grabbed a small detonator from his belt and tossed it into the docking tunnel. The explosion shook the ship, severing the hunter's latch, but instead of retreating, one of them lunged forward. Grabbing Lyra by the arm, she yelped, twisting and scratching with her claws. But the hunter was strong. Sari's eyes widened, and without thinking, she charged, slamming into the hunter and knocking him back. The two girls tumbled to the floor. Together, breathing hard, Mark fired a quick shot into the wall controls, sealing the airlock just as the last hunter tried to get through. The door clanged shut, and the sound of the latch breaking free filled the air. With a jolt, the ship pulled away from the enemy vessel. Mark threw the engines to full power. The positive view outside showed the hunter's ship falling behind. But it wasn't gone. It was turning, lining up for pursuit. "They're not giving up," Lyra said, her voice tight. "They won't stop until they have us," Sari added. Mark nodded grimly. "Then we make it so they can't." He swerved the ship into a dense asteroid field, the dark rocks tumbling in slow, deadly orbits. The girls clung to their seats as the sparrow's wing weaved between the massive stones. The hunter's ship followed, dodging just as fast. Blaster fire lit up the darkness, flashes reflecting off the asteroid surfaces. Mark's hands moved with precision. He threaded the ship through a narrow gap between two spinning boulders. The hunter's ship scraped against one, losing part of its wing but still keeping pace. "They're insane," Mark muttered. "They want the key more than they care about their own ship," Lyra said. Suddenly, a warning light flashed on the console shields at 40%. A glancing hit from the hunter's weapons had weakened their defenses. Mark's mind raced. He couldn't outrun them forever, but maybe he could lose them in the debris. He spotted a massive asteroid with a deep crater, its shadows hiding the interior. With a sharp turn, he guided the Sparrow's wing inside. The walls closed in around them, the ship's lights flickering. Over jagged stone, he powered down the engines and drifted silently, letting the asteroid's rotation carry them deeper into darkness. The girl sat still, barely breathing, outside. The hunter's ship flew past, its scanner sweeping the area. Mark waited, counting the seconds in his head. Finally, the blips on his radar faded as the hunters moved further away. The silence in the cockpit felt heavy. Mark leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. "For now we're safe," he said. But Lyra's ears twitched, and Sari's eyes narrowed. "For now," they both echoed, almost at the same time. It was the first thing they'd agreed on since meeting him, and that told Mark one thing: this was only the beginning of the chase. The asteroid's shadows wrapped around the Sparrow's wing. The engine stayed silent, the ship drifting gently with the slow spin of the rock. Mark kept the lights dim, not wanting to give away their position. Every sound felt louder in the quiet, the faint hum of the life support, the soft rustle of fur as the girls shifted in their seats, the distant creak of the hull cooling from the chase. Lyra sat with her knees pulled up to her chest, her golden eyes staring at the floor. Sari leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her tail slowly flicking back and forth. Neither spoke, but the air between them was thick with unspoken tension. Mark could feel it pressing in, just like the walls of the asteroid around them. He finally broke the silence. "We can't stay here long. Oxygen won't last forever," he said. "I'll need to run the engines again soon, and when we do, they'll probably find us." Lyra looked up. "Then we split up," she said suddenly. Sari's head snapped toward her. "What?" "If we split, they'll have to choose which one to follow," Lyra explained, her voice calm but cold. "You go one way, I go the other. Mark can choose who to take." Sari's claws tapped against the wall. "So that's your plan? Make him pick you?" Lyra's ears twitched. "If it keeps at least one of us safe, yes." Mark sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I'm not leaving either of you behind," he said firmly. But both girls shook their heads almost in unison. "You can't save both," Lyra said. "They'll kill you trying," Sari added. Mark stood, pacing the small space. He knew they weren't entirely wrong. His ship's fuel reserves were low. The shields were damaged, and his weapons wouldn't hold against another long fight. But the idea of choosing one over the other made his stomach twist. He had saved them both, and that meant he had a responsibility to keep them both alive. The girls exchanged a look, and for the first time, Mark saw something in their eyes that wasn't just anger, it was fear. Not just fear of the hunters, but fear of being abandoned again, whatever had happened in their past. It had left them both convinced that everyone eventually chose someone else over them. Before Mark could respond, the radar pinged softly. His heart sank. The hunter's ship had reappeared on the far edge of the asteroid field. They were sweeping methodically, scanning each rock one by one. It was only a matter of time before they reached this one. Mark moved quickly, powering up the engines just enough to maneuver. "We're not staying for them to find us," he said. "But if they catch up again, we'll have to fight or run, and running's getting harder." Sari leaned forward, her voice low. "There's another way," she said. Lyra frowned. "Don't tell him." But Sari continued, ignoring her. "If we give them the key, they'll stop chasing us." Mark froze. "You have it?" he asked. Both girls hesitated. Then Lyra pulled a small crystal from the pouch at her waist. It was about the size of a coin, shimmering faintly with shifting colors. "This is what they want," she said. "It holds the coordinates to the vault on our homeworld." Sari's voice was bitter. "And once they get it, they'll strip it bare and destroy whatever's left." Mark stared at the crystal. If he destroyed it, the hunters might give up, but they might also take out their rage on the girls. If he kept it, they'd keep coming, And if he gave it to them, the girl's home would be lost forever. This is why we can't both stay with you, Lyra said. Quietly, they'll keep hunting as long as the crystal exists, and as long as we're together. We'll be easy to track. Mark tightened his grip on the back of the pilot's chair. The choice was closing in on him, tighter and tighter. Save one, or risk all three. Give up the crystal. Or doom the girl's past forever. The radar pinged again, closer now. The hunters had locked onto the asteroid. Mark could feel the tension in the air. Lyra and Sari were watching him, waiting for him to decide, and for the first time since he met them, he realized they weren't really enemies, not in the way they pretended. They were both just terrified of being left behind. But fear wasn't going to stop what was coming. Mark took a deep breath. The time for waiting was over. It was time to move, and the choice he made next would decide everything. Asterisk, the radar beeps grew faster. Each one like a heartbeat counting down to disaster. The hunters had found the asteroid, and now their ship was moving in fast. Mark's fingers tightened on the controls, his mind running through every trick he knew. He couldn't outrun them. And hiding was no longer an option. If they wanted a fight, then they were going to get one. Lyra and Sari stood behind him, both gripping their stun pistols. The way they held their weapons told Mark they were ready. But the look in their eyes said something else, fear, mixed with stubborn determination. This is where we stop running, Mark said, his voice calm but firm. The girls exchanged a quick glance, and for once, neither argued. He powered the Sparrow's wing out of the asteroid's shadow. The ship gliding into open space. The hunter's vessel loomed ahead, larger and heavier, its hull scarred from years of battles. It didn't need to be fast, it just needed to trap them. Mark angled the ship directly toward it, then veered sharply to the side, releasing a burst of engine flares. The sudden maneuver threw off the hunter's targeting for a moment, buying them a few precious seconds. Lyra, get to the rear turret, Mark ordered. She dashed off without hesitation, her tail streaming behind her. Sorry, I need you on the port side controls. If their boarding craft latches on, cut it loose. Sari gave a sharp nod and ran to her position. The first volley of enemy fire came, streaks of red energy slicing past the Sparrow's hull. Mark rolled the ship, dodging most of it, but one blast clipped the wing, making the ship shudder. Sparks rained down from an overhead panel, but Mark kept flying, weaving through the stars like a predator avoiding a net. From the rear turret, Lyra's voice came through the comm. Got one of their drones, she called. A small explosion flared behind them, proof of her shot, but more drones poured out of the hunter's vessel, forming a deadly swarm. Sari's voice crackled over the link. Boarding craft incoming, port side. Mark banked hard to the right, trying to shake it. The small craft clamped onto their hull, its magnetic locks holding tight. Without waiting for an order, Sari slammed the release control, sending a burst of electrical charge through the latch. The boarding craft spun away into the void, its connection severed. For a moment, it felt like they might actually make it. Then the hunter's ship fired a grappling line, thick, reinforced, and glowing with an energy field. It hooked onto the Sparrow's rear hull, the tether pulling them back like a fish caught on a line. They've got us, Lyra shouted. Mark's mind worked fast. He couldn't break the tether with speed alone. Lyra, aim for the tether's coupling, he ordered. From the turret, Lyra fired shot after shot, but the energy field around the cable absorbed the blasts. Mark flipped a switch on the console, diverting all power to the main engines. The ship roared, the tether groaning under the strain. Now, Lyra, he shouted. One more shot, perfectly timed, hit the coupling at the exact moment the engines pulled with full force. The cable snapped, and the Sparrow lurched forward, free once more. But the hunters weren't done. Their ship surged ahead, blocking the Sparrow's escape path. Weapons ports opened along their sides, glowing brighter as they charged for a massive volley. Mark took a deep breath. We hit them now, or we're finished, he said into the comm. On my mark, Lyra, Sari. Fire everything we've got. The countdown in his head was short. 3, 2, 1. The Sparrow's weapons roared in unison. Rear turret, side cannons, forward blasters. The combined fire slammed into the hunters' shields, making them flare and flicker. Mark aimed for the same spot again and again, pounding it with concentrated fire until the shields finally broke. A burst from Sari's cannon hit one of their engines, sending sparks spilling into space. The hunter's ship wobbled, its return fire weakening. Mark seized the chance, spinning the Sparrow under the enemy vessel and unleashing one last volley straight into their lower hull. The explosion was bright, enough to light the asteroid field for miles. Pieces of the hunter's ship spinning away into the void. Silence fell in the cockpit except for the steady hum of the Sparrow's systems. Mark let out a slow breath. "They're not following us anymore," he said. Lyra's voice came over the comm, exhausted but relieved. "Not with half their ship gone." Sari stepped into the cockpit, her fur messy, her eyes still wide. "We actually did it," she said softly, almost in disbelief. Mark turned to face them both. "You did it," he said. "For once you worked together." Lyra and Sari glanced at each other, and though neither smiled, neither looked away this time. The battle was over. But the war for their survival wasn't. The crystal was still in their possession, and the galaxy was still full of people who would kill for it. But for now, they had a rare thing: time. And maybe, just maybe, enough trust to face what came next. The quiet after the battle felt strange. For hours, the Sparrow's wing drifted through the empty space beyond the asteroid field. The stars outside looked peaceful, like they had no idea how close death had just come. Mark sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the navigation display. His hands were steady now, but his mind wasn't. Lyra was curled up in one of the passenger seats, her golden eyes half closed. She wasn't sleeping, he could tell by the way her ears kept twitching. At every small sound, Sari was at the far end of the cockpit, sitting cross-legged with her back to the wall, her green eyes fixed on the small crystal in her hands. It was the first time Mark had seen it outside of Lyra's pouch, and the sight of it made his stomach tighten. The crystal was beautiful, shimmering with shifting colors that seemed to move like liquid light. But to the wrong people, it wasn't beauty, it was power. Power to unlock a vault filled with resources worth enough to start a war. Power to destroy what was left of the girl's home. And power to keep the hunters and others coming after them forever. Mark finally broke the silence. "We can't keep running forever," he said. "Even if those hunters are gone, someone else will come for this thing." Sari's grip on the crystal tightened. "So what do you want to do? Destroy it?" she asked. Her tone wasn't mocking, just tired. Lyra's ears twitched, but she didn't look up. "If we destroy it, the vault is gone forever," Lyra said quietly. "Our people will never see those resources again." Sari's voice was sharp. "Our people are gone, Lyra. All that's left are scavengers who'll fight over the scraps." Mark leaned back in his chair. "I don't care about treasure," he said. "I care about keeping you both alive." The girls didn't answer, but they looked at him now, both waiting for his decision. And that was the problem. He wasn't sure what the right choice was. If he kept the crystal, they'd have to keep running, always looking over their shoulders. If he gave it away, they'd lose their last link to their past. If he destroyed it, the hunters might stop chasing, but they'd also destroy any hope of reclaiming their heritage. The silence stretched. Finally, Mark stood and held out his hand to Sari. "Let me see it," he said. She hesitated, then placed the crystal in his palm. It felt heavier than it should, like the weight of the choice it carried was pressing into his skin. He turned it over, watching the colors shift. Then he glanced at the girls. "I said I wouldn't leave either of you behind," he said. "And I meant it." He walked to the ship's engineering panel and opened a small compartment. Inside was a data splitter, an old but reliable device. Mark slid the crystal into the slot. The machine hummed as it scanned and copied the data, creating 2 perfect replicas. When it was done, he handed one to Lyra and one to Sari. Then he placed the original back into the compartment and sealed it. "Now you both have it," he said. If one of you gets caught, the other still has the information. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. Sari looked at her copy, then back at Mark. You're giving both of us the same thing? She asked. Yes, Mark said simply. Because I'm not choosing between you, and neither should you. For a long moment, neither girl spoke. Then Lyra slowly uncurled from her seat and walked over to Sari. She held out her copy. You. Keep this, she said softly. Sari blinked in surprise. Why? Because if we're really going to survive, we can't keep fighting each other, Lyra said. And I don't want to lose the only other person who remembers our home. Sari stared at her for a moment, then slowly reached out and took Lyra's hand. It wasn't a hug, and it wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Mark watched them, feeling something in his chest loosen. He knew their journey wasn't over. There would be more dangers, more people hunting for that crystal, but now maybe the two of them could stand together instead of tearing each other apart. He turned back to the pilot's seat and set a new course. Where are we going? Lyra asked. Somewhere far, Mark said with a faint smile. Somewhere the hunters won't find us for a while. Sari's tail flicked once. And after that? She asked. Mark glanced at both of them. After that, we see if we can build something worth protecting. The stars stretched into lines as the sparrow's wing jumped into hyperspace. For the first time since he met them, Lyra and Sari sat side by side. They still didn't smile. But they didn't look away from each other either. And in that quiet moment, Mark knew he hadn't just rescued them. He had given them a chance to be more than enemies. He had given them a future,